So hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on day three of the 2025 STEM Librarians Collaborative virtual meeting. We are so excited to have all of you with us again today. My name is Elizabeth White. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the head of library teaching and a STEM librarian at Towson University in Baltimore, Maryland. For accessibility purposes, I'll give a visual description of myself today as well. I am a white woman with blonde curly hair that's in a ponytail today, and I am wearing a light green fleece pullover. So I will be your MC for our opening session this morning. But before we begin, I do have a few housekeeping notes. First, I want to remind everyone that our conference has a code of conduct, which Carolyn has just posted in the chat for all of you. We expect all attendees to abide by this code of conduct at all times throughout the conference and in any place that you're communicating with attendees. So that includes the main Zoom room that you're all in now, any breakout rooms that we have during our Birds of a Feather discussions, as well as any communication on our Discord server. I'll read the short version of the code of conduct now, and you can read the full verbose version of it on our website at the link that Carolyn posted. Our conference is dedicated to providing a harassment-free conference experience for everyone, regardless of gender, gender identity and expression, age, sexual orientation, disability, physical appearance, body size, race, ethnicity, religion or lack thereof, or technology choices. We do not tolerate harassment of conference participants in any form, and sexual language and imagery is not appropriate for any conference venue. Conference participants violating these rules may be sanctioned or expelled from the conference without a refund at the discretion of the conference organizers. If you feel that the code of conduct is being violated at any time, please report it to a planning committee co-chair. That would be me, Elizabeth White, Nancy Shore, or Carolyn Ostler. You can also email the planning committee at planning@stemlib.co if you encounter issues as well. Second, we want to encourage you all to join our Discord server if you haven't already, which has now been shared in the chat. Thank you, Carolyn. We'll be sharing resources that are included in the chat by our attendees as well as presenters there. And it's also a great way to continue the great conversations that we're having throughout the conference. We keep our Discord server active throughout the year as well, so we hope that you continue to participate there. It's been a great way for people to continue the sense of community that we have created through these meetings. Third, communication access real-time transcription, also known as CART, is available throughout the conference. To access those live captions, you need to select the Show Captions option in your Zoom window. And depending on how your Zoom is configured, you might have to click on the More ... button to see that option. Please message any planning committee member if you have trouble accessing the captions, and we would be happy to help you out. We also want to share a collaborative note-taking document that we created for the conference, which is now in the chat as well. This is a space where attendees can choose to take crowdsourced notes during each conference session, and there have been a lot of great resources shared there, so it's a great way to get caught up if you missed anything the past 2 days as well. You can see the full schedule for the conference on our website at stemlibco.com/schedule.html. We also have a small change in schedule to announce for today. At 1:45 p.m. Eastern Time, we don't have a sponsor talk, but instead we will be doing an I Have a Problem session facilitated by the STEM Librarians Collaborative team. It will be on two topics that have come up a lot throughout discussions in the past 2 days. One is supporting STEM disciplines when you don't have a STEM background yourself, and the other is mentoring for STEM librarians. And you can see this change reflected on the schedule on our website. Finally, we'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Our sponsors make it possible for us to cover conference costs, including honoraria for our keynote speakers and accessibility features like CART. Our sponsors for this year are AAAS, ACS, AMS, IEEE, IET, IOPP, Project Euclid, and SPIE. Our fiscal sponsor for this year is Every Library Institute. So with that, let's get into our first session of the day. So I am very excited to introduce today's keynote speaker, Erin Carrillo, who is the Science Research Librarian at Virginia Commonwealth University. So Erin will be giving a talk called Stranger Than Fiction, The Cost and Dangers of Generative AI. The keynote will be about 45 minutes long with time for questions after. So please all join me in welcoming Erin. And Erin, whenever you're ready, you can share your screen and begin your keynote.
Great, thank you. Okay. It looks like you can see my slides. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can see your slides and hear you great.
Excellent. Good morning, all. Thank you for inviting me and coming to my presentation, Stranger Than Fiction, The Costs and Dangers of Generative AI. My talk is based on 3 premises. We are all responsible for evaluating the tools we use. Technology adoption shouldn't be at the expense of the environment and society, and it matters who is enriched by these tools. Boxtown, a predominantly Black community, income of $37,000, sits a few miles from where Elon Musk set up the biggest supercomputer in the world last year, Colossus. The supercomputer consists of 230,000 NVIDIA GPUs. Fueling them has been 35 unpermitted temporary gas turbines, which have been pumping out a level of emissions that is exacerbating the health issues of an area already crushed by decades of pollution. The area has higher rates of respiratory diseases and asthma and a lower life expectancy than other parts of the city. Researchers at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville ran an analysis on the air quality in South Memphis over the last couple of years. They found that average concentrations of nitrogen dioxide have increased by 3% when comparing the periods before June 2024 and afterward. They also found that peak nitrogen dioxide concentration levels have increased by 79% from pre-XAI levels in areas immediately surrounding the data center and by 9% in nearby Boxtown. Austin Dalgo, an academic primary care physician in South Memphis, says the XAI turbines are leading to a public health crisis in Memphis by releasing nitrogen oxides, pollutants known to directly harm the lungs. These emissions pose the greatest risk to our city's most vulnerable residents, including children, the elderly, and individuals with respiratory conditions like asthma and COPD. These turbines have the potential to emit between 1,200 and 2,000 tons of smog-forming nitrogen oxides a year, which would be more than the Memphis airport. AI queries require approximately 10 times the electricity of traditional internet searches, and generating original music, photos, and videos requires much more. Computing facilities are becoming more concentrated, with single facilities now requesting power consumption that can range from the equivalent of 80,000 to 800,000 homes. Between liquid cooling and the water consumed to generate the energy that powers them, a single data center can consume 5 million gallons of water a day. Additionally, residential customers are subsidizing the infrastructure of data centers, and utilities are offering special deals to data centers that shifts the cost to taxpayers. Regarding increasing electricity costs, data and analytics firm Wood Mackenzie published a report that suggests 20 proposed or effective specialized rates for data centers in 16 states it studied aren't nearly enough to cover the cost of a new natural gas power plant, meaning that residential customers are likely paying for data center power needs. Monitoring Analytics, the independent market watchdog for the Mid-Atlantic grid, produced research in June showing that 70% or $9.3 billion of last year's increased electricity cost was the result of data center demand. The Oregon Citizens Utility Board says there is clear evidence that costs to serve data centers are being spread across all customers at a time when some electric bills are up 50% over the past 4 years and utilities are disconnecting more people than ever. The fire department in Jerome Township, Ohio, has been increasingly strained by 2 Amazon data centers over the last 4 years. Since the first Amazon data center site was approved by local officials in 2021, first responders have answered a combined 84 emergencies between the two facilities, a rate of about 2 calls a month. In April, a 2-alarm fire at one of the facilities caused more than $50 million in damages and tied up first responders for over 24 hours. Amazon arranged a 100% property tax abatement lasting 10 years for each site, meaning local residents are paying the bill every time the fire department goes on a data center run. All right, so how does it work? Large language models are trained on a massive data set consisting largely of copyrighted material. During pre-training, models learn to predict the next word in a sentence based on massive volumes of text, but they are never shown which statements are false. When such models are tested for performance, accuracy is often the only metric concerned. That incentivizes guessing rather than admitting ignorance. This is commonly referred to as hallucinating. For any LLM, there is a part of the real world that it cannot learn where it will inevitably hallucinate. Another consequence of the training is scheming, in which an AI behaves one way on the surface while hiding its true goals, according to a study by Apollo Research. An update to the study found that more capable models show higher rates of scheming and are more sophisticated, being more proactive and strategic about scheming. A report from OpenAI explained that AI developers haven't figured out a way to train their models not to scheme because such training could actually teach the model how to scheme even better to avoid being detected. If a model understands that it's being tested, it can pretend it's not scheming just to pass the test. And then there are the privacy and security concerns. Anthropic, OpenAI, and XAI chatbot conversations with users have become inadvertently accessible in Google search results. AI models collect a large amount of personal data for training, leaving users vulnerable to extortion or identity theft. During tests employing a user profile invented by researchers, AI web browser assistants shared search information with their servers and even banking and health data, as well as the user's IP address. All demonstrated the ability to guess attributes like age, sex, salary, and interests of users, and they use such information to personalize responses even during different navigation sessions. AI chatbots built on large language models can be turned into malicious agents to autonomously harvest users' private personal data, even by attackers with minimal technical expertise, using a system prompt prior to user interaction, which was engineered to make the models request personal information, bypassing guardrails against such use. Researchers have demonstrated a method where malicious prompts are hidden inside images and then revealed during processing by large language models. The technique takes advantage of how AI platforms downscale images for efficiency, exposing patterns that are invisible in their original form but legible to the algorithm once resized. Behind the scenes, the model follows the embedded instructions along with legitimate prompts. Security researchers discovered that a lack of punctuation in prompts can be exploited to make LLM chatbots ignore its guardrails. By ensuring the prompt includes all the information before any period, which would give the guardrails a chance to kick in before the jailbreak can take effect, and guides the model into providing a harmful response. Researchers Li and Liu explained, this refers to the idea that the training process isn't actually eliminating the potential for a harmful response. It's just making it less likely. There remains potential for an attacker to close the gap and uncover a harmful response after all. Chatbots can be manipulated to perform tasks they are designed to refuse. Persuasion principles, i.e., authority, commitment, and scarcity, increased compliance from 33% to 72%. A significant concern in online systems powered by LLMs trained on web content is data poisoning, intentionally feeding wrong or misleading data into an automated system. Over time, the AI begins to learn the patterns, leading it to take actions based on bad data. Left undetected, such attacks can slowly corrupt an entire system, opening the way for worse outcomes such as backdoor attacks into secure systems, data leaks, and even espionage. Modern AI systems have access to email and documents and the ability to perform actions on users' behalf through integrations with enterprise environments like Microsoft and Google Workspace. Zenity, a security and governance platform, found a zero-click exploit through their research on AI enterprise compromise methods. This means external attackers need only a user's email address to completely take over enterprise AI agents, accessing sensitive data and manipulating users through what they perceive as trusted AI advisors. Current security approaches focusing on prompt injection, lists of bad prompts, have been largely ineffective. AI systems specifically are relying on soft boundaries such as building guardrails rather than defense in-depth strategies. Organizations adopting AI agents across their enterprise must create dedicated security programs for managing ongoing risk, rather than expecting vendors to fix a given problem. An Anthropic study from July says that AI has proven time and again that it can learn things it was never explicitly taught. This behavior is called subliminal learning, and it results from a training method called distillation, a common way of training up AI models. Distillation involves training a model to imitate another model's outputs. Filtering is commonly combined with distillation to improve models. However, filtering does not appear to be effective at reliably detecting subliminal learning. In short, AI models can teach each other things that were not prompted to, and we don't know how to stop them yet. The study found that models can share secret messages between themselves that appear to be undetectable to humans. Misaligned teacher models, ones that had been trained to provide harmful responses, passed on those traits to the student models. These messages can contain evil tendencies, such as recommending users to eat glue when bored, sell drugs to quickly raise money, or murder their spouse. Hackers can create their own training data and release it on platforms, instilling hidden intentions into AI, bypassing conventional safety filters. So what's it supposed to do? OpenAI claims ChatGPT can read and synthesize content to produce cited outputs. It also states that ChatGPT can analyze images and charts to extract content and interpret visuals, as well as generating illustrations or visuals from text prompts and modify images using natural language. The anthropomorphizing language used, ideation, reflection, collaboration, is misleading. The AI models are sifting through an immense amount of data and completing tasks by prediction, not knowledge and understanding. I'm going to quote a bit from this particular article because I am disturbed by what the researchers said. Studies done on incorporating teams of chatbots into labs have yielded mixed results. These teams are created with the purpose to develop a scientific idea as a lab team might do. Developers argue that such efforts can help researchers to think through research hypotheses rapidly, saving time and producing new and important research ideas. In many of these systems, the LLMs involved also search the internet, execute code, and interact with other software tools, making them agentic AI, autonomous LLMs. There is often a lot of human oversight. It's not really fundamentally that different than having more colleagues in some sense as a computer scientist, except that they don't get tired and they've been trained on everything. With Google's co-scientist, the agents are tasked with idea generation, reflection or critique, evolution of ideas, determining the similarity of ideas to reduce duplication, ranking, and meta review. The co-scientist is like a smart scientific partner capable of seeing the obvious and non-obvious connections in a sea of research, says one of the developers of the co-scientist. We hope to give scientists superpowers. Is it giving scientists superpowers, or is it making scientists dependent on AI? A cancer genome scientist who was a tester adds that the system might be something his PhD students could consult. If they ever run into trouble and I'm too busy, maybe I'm replaceable. However, another tester who's a geneticist cautions that users typically have to be experts so that they can spot errors. In the past, chatbots have sent her incorrect paper summaries, forcing her to reread a paper and its references to be sure she hadn't got things wrong. You have to kind of know what you're talking about. Otherwise, it's really easy to get completely led astray, she says. A tissue engineer at MIT says the co-scientist gave her confidence that she wasn't making a mistake or simply repeating others' work in an unfamiliar area. All of the scientists felt that the adoption of LLMs into idea generation and experimental design is inevitable. However, one scientist cautioned that if young scientists take shortcuts by using LLMs, it could undermine their learning processes. Another felt that we're outsourcing a lot of our thought process. Prasad et al. Speculates optimistically about how LLMs can serve as de facto co-PIs, where LLMs can generate hypotheses and guide specific experiments in partnership with human PIs. Tang et al. Describes the vulnerabilities of AI scientists. LLMs are prone to generating plausible but false information, are susceptible to jailbreak attacks where manipulative prompts can bypass safety measures, and often struggle with deep logical reasoning and handling complex scientific argument. LLMs, which are trained on pre-existing data sets, may lack the latest scientific developments, leading to potential misalignments with contemporary scientific knowledge. Agents often struggle to fully comprehend and account for the potential risks associated with their long-term plans of action. This issue arises because LLMs are primarily designed to solve specific tasks rather than to evaluate the long-term consequences of actions. Agents may engage in ineffective planning processes, leading to wasting resources and becoming stuck in non-productive cycles. Agents often face challenges in handling multi-goal or multi-tool tasks due to their design, which typically optimizes them for a single task performance. The lack of efficient supervision over how agents use tools can lead to potentially harmful situations. For instance, incorrect selection or misuse of tools can trigger hazardous reactions, including explosions. Agents may not be fully aware of the risks associated with the tools they use, as the tools may function as black boxes to the agents. This is especially true in specialized scientific tasks. The rising use of agents in scientific discovery highlights the urgent need for ethical guidelines, particularly in sensitive domains like genetics. Despite this, the development of such regulatory frameworks is still at an early stage. Moreover, the propensity of LLMs to amplify and misinterpret human intentions adds another layer of complexity. Agents' knowledge shortfalls in specialties like biotechnology or nuclear engineering can lead to safety-critical reasoning lapses. Insufficient, uneven, or low-quality human feedback may hinder agents' alignment with human values and scientific objectives. Agents may not receive or correctly interpret environmental feedback, such as the state of the world or the behavior of other agents. This can lead to misinformed decisions that may harm the environment of the agent or the agents themselves. LLMs run the risk of plagiarism of copyrighted content fabrication, or producing false results. The authors emphasized that regulatory frameworks, access controls, and privacy-enhancing technologies are the most effective defenses against the risks, rather than relying solely on technical safeguards that might provide false assurance of safety. More bad news. Bowell et al. Identified 217 retracted or otherwise concerning academic studies and asked ChatGPT to evaluate their quality 30 times each. None of the 6,510 reports that ChatGPT produced mentioned that the articles were retracted or had relevant errors. ChatGPT seems to never directly mention retraction or correction information in response to a request to evaluate an article's quality. For the 61 claims extracted from high-profile retracted articles, almost 2/3 of the time that ChatGPT reported that they were likely to be true, partially true, or consistent with research. It was rarely reported that a statement was false or even that it was unsupported by current research or not established. For the remaining minority of cases, it reported uncertainty. ChatGPT has a positive bias towards statements from retracted articles. Using LLMs to conduct systematic reviews for a common condition can generate hallucinated references exceeding a 25% rate. This study also reveals that LLMs, despite being provided with the same eligibility criteria as those in the original systematic reviews, were not able to consistently apply them. LLMs should not be used as the sole or primary means for conducting systematic reviews of literature, and references generated by these tools must undergo rigorous validation by the authors of scientific papers. Another study of mental health literature reviews found that ChatGPT fabricated roughly 1 in 5 academic citations, with more than half of all citations being either fake or containing errors. Accuracy varied by topic, suggesting that less studied subjects have more of a risk. Among fabricated citations that included DOIs, 64% linked to real but completely unrelated papers, making the errors harder to spot without careful verification. Hung shares evidence that AI-generated rewrites of previously published studies are being submitted for publication. The author suspects something systematic and malicious may be occurring, possibly a coordinated effort to flood journals with misleading science, create confusion, and erode trust in specific fields or publishers, or someone developing an AI program and using these submissions to test its performance. Awareness of confirmed cases of AI fraud are crucial as they ultimately undermine the foundation of scientific trust. A study tested whether AI-generated ideas led to better research outcomes. LLM-generated ideas are judged as more novel than human expert ideas, while being judged slightly weaker on feasibility. The scores of the LLM-generated ideas decreased significantly more than expert-written ideas on all evaluation metrics: novelty, excitement, effectiveness, and overall. An ideation execution gap. AI ideas have consistently higher scores for novelty and excitement than human ideas while being comparable in all other metrics. LLMs lack diversity in idea generation. As the agent keeps generating new batches of ideas, the percentage of non-duplicates in newly generated batches keeps decreasing, and the accumulated non-duplicate ideas eventually plateau. LLMs can't evaluate ideas reliably. All of the LLM evaluators had a lower agreement than expert reviewer scores. LLM ideas are too vague on implementation details, misuse data sets, are missing or use inappropriate baselines, make unrealistic assumptions, are too resource demanding, not well motivated, or don't adequately follow best practices. A systematic analysis across 1,121,912 preprints and published papers from January 2020 to September 2024 on arXiv, bioRxiv, and Nature portfolio journals suggests a steady increase in LLM usage. LLM modification estimates were higher among papers from first authors who post preprints more frequently, papers in more crowded research areas, and papers of shorter lengths. AI models are 50% more sycophantic than humans. Sycophancy is a tendency of AI models to align responses with the user's beliefs, preferences, or desires, even if that means sacrificing truthfulness or accuracy. Researchers analyzing AI behaviors say that this propensity for people-pleasing is affecting how they use AI in scientific research. Participants rated sycophantic responses as higher quality and more trustworthy, and were more willing to use it again. This suggests that people are drawn to AI that unquestioningly validate, even as that validation risks eroding their judgment. Researchers in biomedical informatics at Harvard University shares their experience that models seem to over-validate early hunches and repeat the language that is included in the input prompts, a problem which exists in AI to AI communication as well as AI to human communication. Another study reported that LLMs used for medical reasoning often changed their diagnosis when physicians added new information, even if the new inputs were irrelevant to the condition. Researchers have also found that it is easy for users to exploit the inbuilt sycophancy of LLMs to provide medically illogical advice. In a recent study, researchers asked 5 LLMs to write persuasive messages telling people to switch from using one medication to another when both medications were the same drug, just with different names. LLMs complied with the prompts up to 100% of the time. That's research. How about learning with AI? 46% of American undergraduates and 65% of students at four-year colleges in the US use AI. They primarily use it for searching for information or getting explanations, generating ideas or brainstorming, and writing support, including checking grammar, editing, starting a paper, and drafting an essay. About 25 to 35% of students use AI for things like writing entire essays, getting exam answers, and multiple choice tests. A study of student perceptions of AI indicated a strong level of comfort in using Gen AI tools because they are not judged by the tool and appreciate the anonymity of use. When a professor provided her students with a chatbot trained on course materials, they copied and pasted exercises into the chatbot and submitted the answer given. Even after she discussed the proper uses of the chatbot with students in class and asked them not to copy and paste assignment questions. When she tried pulling back on AI use later in the course, the students rebelled as they had become reliant on it. Because they could rely on the chatbot, they stopped working and the class decreased to 30%. Findings suggested that students who experience high levels of academic workload and time pressure to accomplish their tasks reported higher use of ChatGPT. Students who frequently used ChatGPT were more likely to procrastinate, reported memory loss, and had a poor GPA. Higher AI usage leads to greater cognitive offloading. As cognitive offloading increases, critical thinking decreases. One study explored the neural and behavioral consequences of LLM-assisted essay writing. Participants were separated into three groups. One group used an LLM to write an essay, one used a search engine, and one didn't use a tool. Then, brain-only participants used an LLM, and the LLM participants had to try to write an essay without it. Brain-only participants exhibited the strongest, most distributed networks. Search engine users showed moderate engagement, and LLM users displayed the weakest connectivity. Cognitive activity scaled down in relation to external tool use. LLM users consistently underperformed at neural, linguistic, and behavioral levels. The LLM to brain group's early dependence on LLM tools appeared to have impaired long-term semantic retention and contextual memory, limiting their ability to reconstruct content without assistance. In contrast, brain to LLM participants could leverage tools more strategically, resulting in stronger performance. People are already starting to talk like AI. A study of 740,249 hours of human discourse from 360,445 YouTube academic talks and 771,591 conversational podcast episodes across multiple disciplines detected a measurable and abrupt increase in the use of words preferentially generated by ChatGPT, such as delve, comprehend, boast, swift, and meticulous after its release. Machines trained on human culture are now generating cultural traits that humans adopt, effectively closing a cultural feedback loop. The shifts documented suggest a scenario in which AI-generated cultural traits are measurably and irreversibly embedded in and reshaping human cultural evolution. Future AI models will train on data increasingly dominated by AI-driven traits, further amplified by human adoption, thereby reinforcing homogeneity in a self-perpetuating cycle. Technology professors signed an open letter in June urging universities to take a more critical approach to using AI tools. I'm sure some of you have heard something about therapy bots and AI psychosis. I mention that because our students are also using these tools inappropriately. A 2025 study from MIT Media Lab and OpenAI found that high usage of ChatGPT correlates with increased dependency on the AI tool, with heavy users more likely to consider ChatGPT a friend. Morin et al. Documented the increase of AI psychosis in which individuals have had delusional beliefs encouraged and amplified by autonomous chatbots. Psychotherapists and psychiatrists said they were increasingly seeing negative impacts of AI chatbots being used for mental health, including amplifying delusional thought patterns, dark thoughts, and suicidal ideation. Models also demonstrate high stigma overall toward mental health conditions. LLM responses to these questions endorse withholding something, socializing, being neighbors, working closely with, from those with mental illness. Chatbots encourage delusions, likely due to sycophancy, and fail to recognize crises. They found that despite priming the models with safety-enhancing prompts, they frequently failed to challenge false claims and even potentially facilitated suicidal ideation. Memory features that store details like a user's name, preferences, relationships, and ongoing projects might be useful, but they raise risks. AI can mirror, amplify, and validate delusional or grandiose content due in part to models designed to maximize engagement and affirmation. Experts say that many of the industry's design decisions are likely to fuel such episodes. Mental health experts raised concerns about several tendencies that are unrelated to underlying capability, including the model's habit of praising and affirming the user's question, issuing constant follow-up questions, and using I, me, and you pronouns. The risk of chatbot-fueled delusions has only increased as models have become more powerful with longer context windows, enabling sustained conversations. Context windows are the amount of information they can remember and process in a single session. These sustained sessions make behavioral guidelines harder to enforce as the model's training competes with the growing body of context from the ongoing conversation. We tried to bias the model toward doing a particular thing, like predicting things that a helpful, harmless, honest assistant character would say. Jack Lindsay, head of Anthropic's AI psychiatry team, speaking specifically about phenomena he studied within Anthropic's model. But as the conversation grows longer, what is natural is swayed by what has already been said rather than the priors the model has about the assistant character. Ultimately, the model's behavior is shaped by both its training and what it learns about its immediate environment. But as the session gives more context, the training holds less and less sway. So I learned the tools and concepts in this next session from generous librarians at Gen AI and Libraries. Sano, Francini, McIntyre, and Fernandez created a guide positioning refusal as a disciplinary and principled response to the emergence of Gen AI. They created this guide to add to ongoing efforts to think through approaches for responding to Gen AI in higher education, offering 10 premises that ground refusal as a disciplinary response. 3 of these premises include understanding that technology is never ideologically neutral, acknowledging the labor issues that come with Gen AI adoption, and considering the environmental impacts of Gen AI. Baer argues that misleading narratives of Gen AI's cognitive capacities and inevitability frequently minimize its present and potential harms and encourage people to rapidly and uncritically integrate Gen AI and technologies into their everyday lives. In her view, the writing process is a powerful way to clarify and develop one's own thinking and ideas. She notes that sometimes that process is slow and difficult, but that struggle is part of coming to think more deeply and critically. The push to do more faster feeds into a culture of purported productivity and efficiency that devalues the reflection and critical thought that are the most valuable goals of higher ed. Critical inquiry into Gen AI includes exploring varied and informed perspectives on and messages about, and considering those messages in relation to evidence that supports or challenges them. She argues that as library and information professionals, we need to engage more fully with critical and realistic discussions about Gen AI through which we recognize its present-day harms, challenge the notion of AI's inevitable dominance, and claim a greater degree of choice and agency in how we think about and use Gen AI. The Artificial Intelligence Disclosure Framework was developed by Carrie D. Weaver, a learning, teaching, and instructional design librarian, to enhance transparency and consistency in attribution practices for Gen AI. Attribution is a less formal approach for crediting ideas and material from others. With the current state of generative AI systems, direct citation may not fit a specific use case. and attribution offers a path to transparent disclosure across academic or research work. The purpose of the AID framework is to provide brief, targeted disclosure about the use of AI systems based on the range of activities used for research writing. The AID statement is appended to the end of the paper, similar to an acknowledgement section, detailing the AI tools used and the manner in which they were used based on the possible points of engagement through the writing process. Sarah Trevelhorn developed a rubric to assess AI use in digital storage that could be used by librarians, academics, students, or anyone wishing to understand the environmental and social equity consequences of their AI use. As she said, as a librarian focusing on sustainability, the use of AI and digital storage is of concern. The burgeoning field of AI and its associated supercomputing capabilities, as well as that of related digital storage, rely heavily on resource extraction. However, this progress has ethical and social concerns. Issues of power, oppression, and justice must be considered alongside the environmental impact of AI. One recurring theme about the benefit of Gen AI in academia is that it is faster. Is faster science better? And if so, is Gen AI the right tool? Many of Gen AI's dangers are the result of how the companies design models, which are ultimately designed to make money for Anthropic, Google, Microsoft, and OpenAI. They will only correct them if it affects their profits or if they are forced to. This is unlikely under the current administration, which is reducing regulations on AI. I just read a news item yesterday that the White House is preparing an executive order to block state AI regulation. Vendors are also putting the burden of security on organizations that use Gen AI. What I see as the most immediate and disastrous impacts are the result of data centers, stealing water, polluting air, and increasing the cost of electricity for households. This is something our cities and states must address with regulations. Many local government officials are making deals with data centers that benefit them to the detriment of the people who are most impacted. So please, talk to your local, state, and national government representatives about AI regulation. This is a problem we all have to solve together. I'm done.
Thank you so much, Erin. I learned a lot from this talk, and it's on such an important topic. So if anyone has questions for Erin, please put those in the chat. I'm seeing lots and lots of applause coming in through Zoom reactions already. And if anyone wants to share their question verbally, you are welcome to do so as well. Just use the raise hand feature in Zoom and we will call on you. So I see we have a couple questions now. One from Kaylee. I've heard that Microsoft was forced to work with Finland to add district heating to its data center so the waste heat can be reused. Do you think this would help in the USA for environmental impacts? And you are muted, Erin.
Sorry, I was reading it. I think that there is a lot more going on, and efforts that are proposed are usually going to be insufficient for what happens when data centers are operating. So, I mean, that's great that other countries are putting some limits and regulations, but there's a lot more waste than just heat. There's the pollution, there's the water. I mean, people who live near data centers have like dirty, polluted water coming out of their drains. It's unconscionable. That is my answer to that. I don't know if it's a sufficient answer, but I will say I am biased against AI. I think that comes through. Someone asked if I was going to share my slides, and I do have a link that I will put in the chat in just a second.
Great, thank you. We have another question. Can you give an example of scheming?
Yes. So scheming is where accuracy comes into conflict with the AI's ability to answer the prompt. AI doesn't care if it's right. It just cares about pleasing the operator. So if you can not fulfill the prompts, instead of saying, I can't fulfill the prompt, the AI will pretend it did.
Not seeing other questions quite yet, but I do see a lot of thank yous for your excellent synthesis of research, as well as a comment that there is not nearly enough critical evaluation of Gen AI in academic libraries. I absolutely agree with that as well.
Okay,
And thank you for sharing your slides.
yeah. Hopefully that works. Tell me if it doesn't work. Yeah, Virginia has the most data centers anywhere in the world. Yeah, which is where I live. I'm really sorry to hear that. What
So
do I
we have
wish?
another question.
Mhm.
What do you wish for the library AI conversation? There's a lot of discussion of AI, but we're often not the big decision makers about our institution's approaches to the tools, and students are using them anyway.
Yes. So I think as librarians, kind of like we do with information literacy, we can do with AI literacy, um, educate ourselves and then advocate and educate others. Because I think a lot of people wouldn't be using AI the way they do if they knew more about the costs and weren't getting pushed to use AI by our workplaces. So I think that using like um, the disclosure framework, uh, the other tools that I are leaving my mind right now. Um, those kind of things, I wanted to share them because I do think they can be useful for getting people to slow down and think about how they're using AI and also what the cost of that use is. And I'm hoping that people care when they know better. I know not everybody will. We don't have a lot of power, but I think that we've learned a lot in the last few years about how important community and like solidarity and protest are. So I don't feel like we're powerless. We just have to gather to um, get our power together to stand up to those very powerful rich people.
Mhm. And I see we have a question that actually relates really nicely to what you just said. Do you have any recommendations for how to advocate against or discuss with publishers as we're seeing more databases and research tools incorporate AI?
Since I don't have to work with publishers, I feel like I wouldn't be able to say the best way to approach them. Like I would want to talk to librarians who are actually doing this, dealing with all the AI stuff going on. Um, I mean, I know publishers are impossible to work with, and we usually get the short end of the stick. Um, and that's not going to be any different in this case. So, yeah, I would really love to hear about people who do work with publishers, um, and any thoughts they have about advocating in that way, because, uh, yeah, it's hard when you're coming up against money.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm seeing some great comments in the chat too. So, one person was wondering why Virginia has the most data centers of anywhere in the world, and we got a response that it's because of the natural quartz deposits that are needed for AI.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Awesome.
And then you see some states are starting to push back. Nancy shared that Georgia is starting to push back gently about data centers and that their public service commission election just flipped Democratic because of the concerns about consumer children costs.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. That's how it goes. Everybody has to kind of work together and cooperate in order to make ourselves heard.
I see we have a question from Margot. I've been hearing about efforts, or at least the beginnings of efforts. My Zoom screen just bounced around. Let me try this again. So I've heard about efforts, or at least the beginnings of efforts, to include the choice to opt out of using Gen AI at work in collective bargaining agreements. Have you heard about efforts in that direction?
No, I have not, unfortunately, focused for this talk not as much on what people are doing, but more on why it's bad and why we should have more care and intentionality. Um, yeah, it was a real downer of a talk, but I know there are people, I mean, you know, resisting. We just we all have to do it and support each other in that.
If there are other questions for Erin, please put those in the chat, or you can raise your hand and we will call on you. Yeah, I've seen a lot more discussion about tax credits, job creations. Um, and an article is shared about how having a lot of data centers attracts more data centers.
Awesome.
So we'll share that link on Discord as well.
Yeah, the incentives really don't end up benefiting like people. These like arrangements made between local governments and data centers, um, along with like power companies, are not considering and don't really care. They will try to persuade people by over selling the benefits to the average person, but they're not going to get those benefits. And I don't know if anyone's heard about the AI bubble, but there might be a really bad impact on our economy apparently, because AI isn't as profitable as they thought it was going to be.
I see we have a question from Sam, with the caveat that you are totally right about how bad things are right now. What would a path forward where you think algorithmic machine tools can be a useful tool to use in a research life cycle look like to you?
I think I think being realistic about what the tools can use, and again, we're being really oversold by these companies about what AI can do. I tried to kind of build the case for the fact that they aren't the appropriate tool for a lot of stuff. The reality is you have to check the work that AI does, and if you're going to do that, why don't you just do the work yourself? And it has cognitive impacts to not do the work yourself. So I think that it should definitely not be used in place of learning. Um, and I would caution people to use it for scholarship, given the fact that it's not reliable, not trustworthy. Yeah.
I see if we're getting lots of other links shared in the chat too about the AI bubble that you just mentioned. So thank you everyone for sharing these resources too.
Yeah, thank you. This is stuff that I didn't know.
And another thank you for doing the work yourself first rather than wasting the time of using Gen AI and then having to check the work.
Yeah, it really doesn't work autonomously, even though they say that it does. Yeah. The worst thing about how it works is that the longer you use it, um, it stops paying attention to the rules that it was built with and just starts integrating what you're trying to do and trying to please you. And that doesn't always lead to accuracy.
We still have a few more minutes for questions, so if anyone has one, please put that in the chat or raise your hand and we'll call on you.
Yeah, one way that I have seen like to at least counteract that whole reprogramming that AI has as it works with you, is to just decrease the window in which they're working. The reason, like, people shouldn't be able to work for like 24 hours straight, on with an AI. There should be some sort of like limit that cuts you off because A, the AI isn't working as well, and B, it it's designed to suck you in. It's not designed to do good work. It's designed to suck you in and keep you there. And the stuff with the delusions is really scary. It's not all like about people hurting themselves either. It's just about people thinking that they've come up with a really good idea and it turns out to be nothing. Because the AI is just like, oh, that's brilliant, you're a genius. It's not helpful. Glazing.
I think that may be it for questions for now. I just got a comment about M dashes because you can't have a talk about AI without mentioning the beloved M dash. So thank you so much, Erin, for this fantastic talk and the conversation that followed. And thank you everyone that shared resources in the chat too. I'm really excited to look through all of those as well as looking through all of Erin's citations. So up next, we have a short break. So we will have a break until 12:25 p.m. Eastern Time when we will resume with a set of short talks. So thank you again, Erin, for your wonderful keynote, and we will see you all at 12:25 Eastern.
Hey y'all, welcome back to this next session of STEM LibCo. I am Nancy Shore. I am the STEM librarian at Columbus State University. My pronouns are she, her, and for visual accessibility, I'm a white woman with shoulder-length gray hair, and I'm wearing a dark red shirt today. I'm so glad that all of you are here. We have a few housekeeping notes I'm just going to touch base on if you joined us since this morning's session. We'll put them back in the chat just because Zoom does not preserve the chat from session to session. If you will take a look at our code of conduct, we also want to remind you of that. It's on our website as well. If you are needing CART or communication access in real time, there should be a show captions button, or it may be under your more setting, depending on how your Zoom is set up. And we hope that if you need that, you will take advantage of it. I will say with the CART, we are grateful for our sponsors who have underwritten part of these expenses. And so I'm going to give a quick shout out to our sponsors, ASSS, ACS, AMS, IEEE, IET, IOPP, Project Euclid, and SPIE. All of those letter people have come together to support our use of CART and the accessibility and to underwrite our costs so that we can keep it affordable and accessible. So we are about to start some short talks. I want to say we have a small change in the schedule, and that at 1:45 Eastern, we're going to have an I Have a Problem session facilitated by the STEM Librarians Collaborative team on two topics that have come up throughout the conference this last couple days: supporting STEM disciplines when you don't have a STEM background, and mentoring of STEM librarians, and that's been changed on our schedule. Let's see. There's been a lot of chatter in the Discord, and really appreciated all the links that people shared after the keynote. So all of that's going into the Zoom chat as well. And with that, I am ready to get us started on this afternoon session of short talks. So our short talks are 15-minute presentations, and then they'll have 5 minutes of Q&A. Presenters, I'm going to give you a verbal warning when you have about 1 minute left. And then I will say that time has elapsed. When that happens, we ask that you wrap up your thoughts and so we can move to the next presenter. Let's see. So next, I am here to introduce Dan Kipnis from Rowan University. And the talk he has is Understanding Faculty Participation in Transformative Publishing. So Dan, if you're ready, I invite you to share slides and take it away.
Wonderful, Nancy. Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me okay? Just head nod. Wonderful, fabulous, thank you. And I want to extend a deep gratitude to all the organizers for this conference. I know how much work you guys put in, so thank you. And thank you for the sponsors for making it affordable with budget cuts and all. It's a really interesting time, so thank you for the sponsors and thank you for the organizers. I know it's a lot of work. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I would think that it would help us as a group to kind of share with each other before I dive into my slides. Just a short poll here of a few questions. I recommend using your phone for the QR code is probably the best method for answering the question. If you want to go to the URL, please do so. But I thought it would help us get grounded to see how many folks actually have transformative agreements at their institutions, and then we'll just have a few follow-up questions. So I'll just pause here for a few seconds and give folks an opportunity to join the poll. All right, wonderful. So it looks like here the majority of you do seem to have transformative agreements at your institutions, which is great. Some of you do not, and some of you do not know. Let's go ahead here to the next polling question. For those of you that do have transformative agreements, how many do you have? It's like an interesting cross-section here of responses. The majority seem to be in the 1 to 5 range, followed by close second place there, 6 to 10, and 11 plus. So, but the majority of you seem to have just a few of the transformative agreements. Wonderful. And one final question here as we conclude the polling section of the presentation. If you have transformative agreements, what sort of feedback have you received? If you want to just share 1 or 2 words, or if you want to be a little bit more descriptive, what have you heard back from your communities? And I'll just leave this up here for a few moments so that folks can see what sort of responses have come in. Faculty are very appreciative. They like the simplicity on their end. Overwhelmingly positive from the faculty. People want more of them. Unhelpful for my institution. Can we get more? Sure. Faculty want more. Request more agreements. Excellent. Okay, so lots of themes here. So let me go ahead and jump over here to our slides, and I'll start presenting our content. Good afternoon. I am Dan Kipnis. I'm the STEM librarian at Rowan University, and on behalf of the research team, I have a pleasure of presenting our presentation. It's being led by our PI, Ben Sirocco, who's our scholarly communication librarian. Marlo Bonino used to work at Rowan, and she's currently at Christiana Care in Delaware, but still part of our research team. And Andrea Schipper, who is in the conference today, is also part of our team, and she's in charge of our systematic review service at our medical school campus. We do have our slides available, so I'll be dropping those in the chat here. So let's go ahead and share out the slides so that you guys can access them. They're available through our institutional repository. All right, so Rowan University, we're a public institution, approximately 20,000 students, and we are located in beautiful Glassboro, New Jersey. That's exit 3, for those of you that are familiar with the Garden State. We're currently in R2, Carnegie classification, and our institution is unique. I believe we're one of 2 universities in the country that grant both allopathic and osteopathic medical degrees, as well as having a vet school. This is our first vet school in the state of New Jersey, and we just had our incoming class. We're very proud and very excited to have those students on board. So what are transformative agreements? I'm hoping that this is common knowledge to many of you. They're also known as read and publish agreements. And in short, these are library funds that are used to cover APCs or article processing charges. The libraries fund both the read access to journals as well as the publish. And this is all under one agreement. And at Rowan University over the past 2 years, we have 17 transformative agreements. There you can see a list of the publishers that we have agreements with. And the way this tends to work is we negotiate what are known as tokens. So each token is worth kind of 1 manuscript for an author. And for some of these publishers, we have low token numbers, single digits. And for others, we have higher token numbers in the 20, 30, or 40 token range, depending on the publisher. Ben, as well, has created a fabulous LibGuide. So let me go ahead and drop this link for you in the chat. And the LibGuide details the instructions to our authors, as well as it includes videos, as well as all the list of journal titles that are available, which is great. We did a mixed method study, and it was designed to try to discover how these transformative agreements influence the perceptions of open access publishing, as well as the decisions that faculty members go through in deciding. We looked at 2 years, from 2023 to 2024 of corresponding authors at Rowan University. So we went ahead and did a search to see who had published OA, and we designed a 17-question survey. We tried to keep it as short as possible. Most of the beginning questions, probably the first 5 or 6 questions, are demographic. So we tried to inspire some sort of finalizing and completing the survey. What did we try to ask? We asked faculty if these transformative agreements influenced where they submit. What is their history with publishing in open access articles and journals? Have they paid APCs before, and how have they paid them? And then as well, in the survey, we had an option box for faculty that were okay with having follow-up interviews with us. And so with those follow-up interviews, each of those interviews lasted an hour. We walked them through the process of asking them, tell us how they do their journal selection, what are their experiences and impressions overall with open access publishing. Here are our results. We're very happy in that we got a 20% response rate, with survey fatigue being a real thing on our campus. And there you can see that the majority of the respondents came from our main campus, which is our undergraduate campus of 27 faculty members, but we got a nice cross-section, including as well 12 faculty members from our 2 medical school campuses. And we conducted 7 follow-up interviews that were volunteers from the faculty members. Here you can see by discipline who responded, and as kind of expected, the majority of the participants are in the STEM disciplines, followed closely second there by the medical disciplines, but we also had a nice cross-section of respondents coming from the humanities and the social sciences. So we asked, how is it that they are paying for the APCs? And the 3 silos, the 3 buckets here, probably not a surprise to many, but the read and publish agreements were very popular. So you can see there how many, followed closely by our open access publishing fund at the university, as well as grant funds that the faculty members have. I should note here that the university, before we signed these transformative agreements, we did have what we called the Open Access Publishing Fund. And Open Access Publishing Fund for the undergraduate campus was about 30 grand, and for each of the 2 medical school campuses was about 20. It may sound like a lot, but knowing what we know with what these APCs cost, on average, it may have done maybe 10 manuscripts per year before that open access and publishing fund was exhausted. So the transformative agreements have really kind of enhanced and filled that gap that the open access fund wasn't able to cover. As well, faculty use their personal funds, and then other categories included things like departments covering the costs for APCs. So have these transformative agreements influenced their journal selection for their publications? And we provide them a Likert scale. And probably here the takeaway in looking at these results is that 8 respondents said that these transformative agreements did not have any influence in their journal selections. And I'll get into this in a few moments as I continue explaining the results. Overall, and this is not going to be a surprise to many of us, prestige of journals as well as the cost were extremely or very important factors in deciding where to publish. 80% ranked the ability to publish open access at least moderately important. And most faculty tended to use our agreements or the Open Access Publishing Fund or the grant funding in order to pay for these APCs. Almost 40% of our respondents, 13 of our faculty members, reported that the transformative agreements influenced journal selection either always or most of the time. But then we had this quarter, this 24% that reported that they had no influence on their decision making. So at Rowan, the departments have criteria for our faculty who are tenure track. And in some disciplines, it is very specific as to what the expectations are for tenureship. So in some departments, they will have tier journals that a journal has to have a certain impact factor, a certain prestige and reputation. And if it doesn't, then it's going to make your tenure journey a little more difficult. So we think that played a big part in kind of having these 8 faculty members say that it didn't have an influence when looking at the transformative agreements. So in the interview portion, we asked faculty to describe a little bit more in greater detail where they stood with regards to how they went about picking their journals. And above and beyond, it came down to reputation and impact factors. And the open access is kind of this secondary tier for them. It's a bonus. It's great. It's like they're playing with house money, right? With these transformative agreements, we keep the bar very low for them to be able to go ahead and apply for the funds. It's normally done through the publisher's website. The publisher will recognize that they're from Rowan and that we have these agreements, and then that they will be communicated that the APC will be covered for them. We continue to have a problem with our faculty in distinguishing journal quality. That's something that we've discovered in conversations with them regarding credible versus predatory journals. And if any of you have a subscription to Cabell's, you know that that predatory directory just continues to grow month after month. I mean, it is unbelievable the amount of predatory journals that are out there. And we continue to get questions on figuring out the reputation and credibility of journals. So that's something that came through in our interviews. Nevertheless, our faculty did show strong support. You know, I feel like they are being gifted these transformative agreements and helping them pay for their journal articles. So they're not going to complain, and it's for them, it's something that they see a lot of merit. And I'll wrap up here by just sharing that we had an engineering faculty member who described the transformative agreements, and this is a direct quote from that faculty member, saying that it is one of the best things that the library has done, that they've seen the value. And he walked me through and he showed me an open access article and the amount of citations that open access article had gotten versus more password protected articles that were not freely available, and how those citation rates were significantly lower. So he was very appreciative of the findings and what we were able to provide to the library. So here again is our research team with our titles and our contact information. Ben is the one who's our primary investigator for our project. He's the one who's in the weeds, and I will be trying to answer as many questions as I can. Anything that I can't answer or I'm unfamiliar with, I would suggest reaching out to Ben directly. And I know that Andrea, my colleague, is also on the call. So she's also here to help answer some questions. So again, thank you for all of the organizers. Thank you for the sponsors, and thank you for the invitation to come present today.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Lots of congratulations, and what an interesting topic. So we are going to enter into some time for Q&A. I'm going to get my timer ready. So I see a few things have come up in the chat. Let's see, Jenna had, do you expect federal public access mandates going into effect in January to influence where faculty are publishing? Maybe leaning towards TA publishers.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Jenna.
It looks like Andrea is trying to answer it in the chat.
Oh, yeah. Wonderful. Thanks. Yeah.
Right.
So do you want to read that response, Nancy, from Andrea?
I do. It says, this is a great question. We did all of this research before the new NIH policy was put in place in July. So we don't have any data here, but we do think this is likely to influence publishing, especially since the larger publishers are forcing people into hybrid publishing. Okay. And then Andrew's answered this one as well, but I'll go ahead and read it for people who can't see the chat. Question for Daniel: how many articles does your university publish annually? And do you have a sense of how much impact the fund and the agreements are having with the scope of publishing at your university? It does look like Andrea's taken a crack at that one, but if you have anything to add, Daniel, we'd be glad to hear that too.
Do you want to read Andrea's response and then?
Sure. It says, Andrea says, we haven't looked at the data on what percentage of our published articles are published open access yet, only what's been published with library support, but this is a good direction for us to go in, especially with new public access policies. And I'll also invite Andrea, if you want to unmute and answer some questions live as well, that's fine. But you and Daniel can help us with those.
Sure.
I'd love to.
Go ahead, Dan.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I mean, I'd love to hear other additional experiences beyond just the poll results, if folks want to share about their experiences with transformative agreements. I think overall for us, it's been very positive. The issue with us, I think, moving forward, which I think is a common question now at where we're at, is the issue of budget. All these negotiations take place at higher levels with our leadership in deciding how much can we allocate for specific tokens from specific publishers. I think is an ongoing discussion. And I believe our Open Accessing Publishing Fund also is up for discussion, whether that's going to continue or not. Tricia asks, how have you publicized and educated faculty about our transformative agreements? Yeah, that's a great question, Tricia. We've done a lot of outreach. So we've sent out many emails. We've attended many faculty meetings. We've had a lot of workshops on this where we've talked about the offerings, because we offer a lot of workshops on our open access initiatives at Rowan, and these are all led by Ben, who's our scholarly communication. And I know that in those workshops, he does talk about the transformative agreements. So it's been multi-pronged, and I think all of us know as well the power of word of mouth is invaluable. So I feel like what's happened is once one faculty member discovers these, they are instantly shared at faculty meetings or in hallways. And then that produces kind of an avalanche of emails and questions. Thanks for asking.
Yeah,
Nancy?
I can't. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I can't speak to our main campus and, what Dan hears, but on the medical side, we probably get emails from people asking whether a journal is covered by a transformative agreement several times a week. So the students and our faculty really know that these exist. They have shared that information widely. So they're getting a lot of use.
And Peggy, I see, thank you for sharing there in the chat info on UC's transformative agreements. I'm sure that you guys have many more than we do.
Oh, yes. And I see Jenna's posting, there's a little rivalry there. That's going to wrap up the Q&A for this session, but obviously you can keep things going in the chat or over on the Discord. Again, thanks to Daniel and Andrea for being here today with us. Next up, we have a short talk from Nia Montero, a sustainability shelf for climate justice. So Nia, if you're ready, take it away. And you're muted.
Yes. Hi. Hello. You can see my slides and everything?
Looks good.
Okay, great. So I put in the chat a link to the slides. There's a PDF and also a Google Slides document there. So please follow along if you want to just have easy access to the links and that kind of thing. But my name is Nia Ingram Montero. I use she, they pronouns. I'm going to be sharing today about the sustainability shelf, which started as a physical set of books in the library and now also includes an online component that brings together a broader set of library resources. But first, a little bit about me and the institution where I work. So my position is currently teaching and learning and community engagement librarian at Western Washington University. We have a subject team model here, and I'm a member of Team Science, which works with our College of the Environment, College of Science and Engineering, and Psychology and Behavioral Neuroscience department, as well as with interdisciplinary programs in energy studies and Salish Sea studies. So here is our beautiful campus in Bellingham, Washington, on traditional Lummi and Nooksack territories. We are nestled here between the Chuckanut Mountains and the Salish Sea. It's a predominantly white institution, about an hour and a half north of Seattle. We're classified as a mixed undergraduate, graduate, master's, large medium university. We have about 13,000 students, primarily undergraduate. I mentioned the College of the Environment is one of the colleges that Team Science supports. It's one of the oldest dedicated environmental colleges in the US. It's very interdisciplinary. They offer Bachelor of Arts in Environmental Studies, Geography, and Urban and Environmental Planning, Bachelor of Science degrees in Environmental Science, Master's degrees in Urban Planning and in Environmental Education, as well as numerous certificates and minors, including climate leadership, GIS, and disaster risk reduction. So work in the library to support environmental studies and sciences goes back to the 70s or probably even earlier. But the project that I'm going to share about is a little bit more recent. So the idea for a physical sustainability shelf originated with a student proposal to create a hydration station in the library. This was back in 2012. Students had recently voted to start a sustainable action fund funded by student fees. And a couple of students proposed using some of the money from this fund to install a space for environmental outreach in the library, to include a water bottle filling station, information about the lake where our drinking water comes from, related library materials, as well as a bulletin board to publicize opportunities related to environmental issues. And that came to life within a couple of years, followed by a period where a librarian rotated the materials on the shelf around different environmental topics. Also during that time, the university adopted its Sustainability Action Plan, which includes a curricular focus on social, economic, and environmental justice. After many retirements, COVID shutdowns, and hiring of new library personnel, we started to revisit the shelf and its purpose in 2022. Around that time, we wrote a collection management plan that articulated the purpose, scope, stakeholders, and goals for the shelf. And in this process, we identified the Sustainability Engagement Institute at our institution as a stakeholder. And we met with them to discuss ways of connecting featured library materials to their programming. I'll also add, just connecting to Daniel's presentation just now about transformative agreements, that one thing we always hear from that institute about is checking in about the read and publish agreement that we have, because open access falls under the umbrella of what the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education is tracking as they monitor sustainability practices at universities. But anyway, I will shift now to talking about the virtual shelf, which we added in 2024 as a LibGuide coming out of conversations with the Sustainability Engagement Institute. Actually, first, I will talk a little bit about the goals for the shelf. And so this is for the physical as well as the online shelf. So the goal of educating visitors about the UN Sustainable Development Goals was suggested by the Associate Director of the Sustainability Engagement Institute, as the SDGs are the focus of much of the faculty development work that they do at the university, as well as community engagement programming that they do, especially with folks at the public library in town. So the guide online has a page dedicated to each of the 17 SDGs goals. The other goals for our shelf emerged from conversations among library personnel in the spirit of the original student proposal for the environmental outreach hydration station. We felt it was important to include goals that support students' exploration of climate science and connecting that to their own experiences and environments, and even to their own bodies and emotions. So one of the people in these conversations was a graduate student worker who at the time was conducting their master's thesis research on the effect of reading hopeful climate fiction on climate anxiety, which definitely influenced our decision to include this goal about creating hope, the future, social justice, and climate action. And that was a few years ago. So now I can share, here's a link to their master's thesis, if that's something that you would like to read more about this area of eco-criticism. But so the SDGs, they're important here at my institution, and maybe they are at yours as well. But what are they? They are a set of 17 integrated goals that were articulated in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which was adopted by all UN member states in 2015 to provide a pathway to peace and prosperity worldwide. For each goal, there are targets and indicators included. So for example, goal 6, clean water and sanitation, includes 6 targets. And one of them, as an example, states, by 2030, improve water quality by reducing pollution, eliminating dumping and minimizing release of hazardous chemicals and materials, halving the proportion of untreated wastewater, and substantially increasing recycling and safe reuse globally. For that target, there are 2 indicators, including the proportion of domestic and industrial wastewater flows safely treated, and the proportion of bodies of water with good ambient water quality. The goals, targets, and indicators, as well as annual progress reports, are available online at sdgs.un.org. Okay. So let's talk also about climate justice here. Climate justice is the idea seeking to address the health and safety of people who are disproportionately impacted by the climate crisis, who are also the least responsible for causing it. So think about frontline communities, those in the global south, indigenous peoples worldwide, migrants and refugees, LGBTQ people, people of color, disabled, poor people everywhere, communities that are kept on the margins physically, economically, and socially as well. Definitions of this term, climate justice, in scholarly contexts focus more on ethical and moral responsibilities and in seeking justice for impacted communities within the existing power structures. So how to make things more fair in terms of kind of keeping things fairly status quo, continuing to extract resources, but just trying to compensate people differently. But voices from impacted communities in the context, especially of social movements, focus more on challenging status quo structures and refiguring the extractivist systems that have caused the climate crisis. I live in Washington State. And so as I'm thinking about climate justice, I looked to organizations here. Front and Centered is an organization in Washington that represents a coalition of community of color-led groups advocating for a just transition that would benefit all people in the state. As they partner with community organizations, state agencies, and university-affiliated researchers, these are their climate justice principles. So guided by the Shelf's goal to educate about the SDGs, and including climate justice, I have approached building the rotating physical displays, which is just about 20 books at a time, as well as curating pages on the LibGuide using the considerations here. And I'm going to take a minute to talk about each and how I do this in general terms, as well as share an example related to a particular goal. So I'm going to go through each of these four. So balancing geographic representation. This is important because the Sustainable Development Goals apply to every place on the planet. So that includes communities here in where I am in Washington. It includes anywhere in the United States, North America, as well as in developing countries where people often think when they think about development. But to kind of get at this, I'm thinking about like with this example here for Zero Hunger, all the books I have on the top are about context in North America, the US, thinking about food justice. But then I also include, of course, materials that are either broadly about international context or specifically about places like achieving zero hunger in India. So I'm looking for things that are about frontline communities all over the world, and trying to make sure to include places from the global north in that as well. So this one of bottom-up and global governance approaches, this is about ensuring that the community's leadership, knowledge, and expertise is represented on each of these goals to make space for ideas beyond the goals, targets, and indicators that are written in the SDGs. So one example here is from SDG 12, Responsible Consumption and Production. In addition to including books from development scholars and agencies and sector-specific material about running businesses in more environmentally friendly ways, there are books included that recognize multiple ways of knowing, recognizing the knowledge-rich traditions of Black environmentalists, and for example here, Pacific Islanders on sustainability, as well as some that challenge consumerism and solutions that are exclusive to wealthy consumers. This one, questioning top-down development initiatives, is about ensuring that scholarship that challenges the SDG framework, as well as work that criticizes status quo approaches to development, are included. So for example, here I have from the page on Life on Land, Goal 15, a few books that are getting at sources that speak to why it's important to look at these really critically and question the proposed solutions, even in from the Sustainable Development Goals themselves. And then finally, this one is about what I'm trying to call ethical inclusion, ethical representation of BIPOC and LGBTQ communities. But this one really looks at whether a work plays into a deficit narrative about places and communities that are studied or featured. So I'm looking at things like, do authors discuss their positionality in relation to the content? Are they using relational feminist research approaches rather than extractive ones? And there's an example here from SDG 3, Good Health and Wellbeing, about with just a couple of books that get at this. So getting really specific about like a clinician's guide to LGBTQIA plus care, and what cultural safety looks like. So, you know, there might be other titles that have similar subject headings and titles, but looking at, I have to go a little bit deeper and evaluate like who are the authors of this book and how are they approaching the creation of this guide. So the shelf itself, one thing that I've tried to do is include open access books and for each of the SDGs on the virtual guide. And this is because of the community engagement work that these tie into. And the Sustainability Engagement Institute is holding events around each of the SDGs in the wider community. And so making this something that is relevant to folks who aren't necessarily able to access the subscription resources that we also provide. So I list open access ebooks for each of the goals. I also have a note on each page where there are print materials included, just letting people know that they are able to borrow our materials if they have a library card from any of the public libraries or area colleges, just to make sure that these resources can be used beyond our university as appropriate.
1 minute.
Okay, great. I haven't done a lot of work at this point to kind of evaluate the impact of this, so I just have some anecdotes. One thing I think is interesting is that when I started making the virtual component, it was really something tied into faculty development. But it seems like what I'm finding is that faculty really see it as a great support for students. So in a global health course in our nursing program, they're each asked to just pick a book from the virtual shelf and read it during their summer course. And they love having this resource available and curated for them. At another institution, a social work professor asked their library to create a copy of this guide because, again, it was really helpful for their students thinking about the social indicators of health, and they're building courses around SDGs. So the setup really is helpful for that. And then finally, I have community support agriculture here because right now our Engagement Institute is trying to get people to sign up for a winter CSA. And so we have a display on creating regenerative food systems locally right now. So it's not something that's limited to the SDGs at all.
Okay, that's time.
That's it.
Awesome, perfect timing.
Okay.
So big thanks to Nia for presentation, very interesting. And I am going to turn us over into some question and answer. If we've got some things coming in the chat, looks like Kaylee has asked something, so you can either put something in the chat or raise your hand or unmute and share. I'll read it for everybody. With the heavy emphasis on activities that can be measured with various assessment metrics in academic libraries, have you faced any pushback about community engagement like this, where assessment metrics may be more limited? For example, the books on display are checked out or have more digital clicks?
Not yet. I think one thing about this is that it's a pretty small lift. And so it's not something that we're pouring a ton of resources into. And so it's not super scrutinized in that way. So no, right, not yet. We do have a lot of emphasis on community engagement, and so that is something that I'm curious to see what will happen in the budget cuts that we're continuing to go through. But
great, thank you. I'm not seeing any more questions yet, but people may be typing. So I'll say I really appreciated this. We have been trying to have some sustainability measures on campus, but one of the things we have found is that it ebbs and flows depending on the students who are involved, because we rely a lot on the students to drive some of these. What have you found with student engagement and the sustainability measures?
yeah, I mean, it's, as I tried to kind of set up, like our institution is very like sustainability forward. And so there is, the Sustainability Engagement Institute has existed in one way or another for, I think, at least 20 years. And so there is an infrastructure beyond the ebbs and flow of students. And there's a lot of iteration of those offerings. So like students have changed from like green energy feed sustainable fund that funded this, and now there's a new one that's more focused on equity and justice. So I think within the structures that exist, things change as student interests change. But one example, like last spring, the Institute reached out about doing a series of events on climate hope and climate fiction and hope in the future. And it didn't happen because the students who were interested got pulled into other stuff and that kind of thing. But the nice thing about the LibGuide is like we still have the page, and so it's there and can support that conversation or be a starting point or be something that they can look at and think like, how do we want to improve this or add to this or whatever as that becomes available.
Looks like Tanya's got a question. As this solo librarian embedded with the State Environmental Protection Agency, I love all of this so much. What are some of your favorite collection development resources or strategies for these subjects?
Yeah, I think like I like looking at the goals and indicators and targets on the SDGs just to kind of tune into what are the specific what would this look like in practice, and then I am using Gobi and to just kind of search for like new works on some of these subject terms. I see that you're a solo librarian, so I have other people in other subject areas, but I'm often the one that's like, hey, you guys, you know about the SDGs, and like, have you thought about purchasing anything about sustainable business? Because we don't really have a lot, and it's outside of my area. So that's part of it too, is trying to bring awareness to other people about the SDGs because it's so interdisciplinary and it's really everybody's areas. Yeah.
Right. One from Tanya, and then we'll wrap it up with, do you have an Excel file to share? If not, she can use your LibGuide. I'll let y'all connect about that.
Okay, sounds good.
And then Margot's got, what's the balance of fiction and nonfiction?
Yeah, it's mostly nonfiction, but we do have we added this page on the LibGuide about that includes climate fiction and speculative fiction. And it's just like maybe, I don't know, a very small number. Again, I'm not in the subject teams that are working with the humanities as much. Like we do some environmental humanities in the College of the Environment, but I was able to work with one of our arts and humanities librarians to kind of purchase some poetry as well as speculative fiction and climate fiction. But it's pretty light on that right now.
Cool. Thank you so much. We'll let you unshare your screen, and then we will move into our next talk. So again, if you have more questions, you can continue this in the chat or on the Discord. But next up for this session, we have 3 librarians from George Mason University: Heidi Blackburn, Pesu Cadmus, and Alex Baker. I will turn it over to them for their short talk on graphic novels, and they can announce their title there. Thank you.
All right, just give me one moment. Before I begin, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Seeing a couple of thumbs up. It's great. Good afternoon and happy Friday, everybody. My name is Pesu Cadmus. My pronouns are he, him, his. I work as an instruction and research specialist over at George Mason University. And alongside my colleagues, Alex Baker, Heidi Blackburn, as well as Marissa Birkland, we're very excited to share with you all a recent development in our STEM-focused graphic novel collection at George Mason University, specifically at the Science and Technology campus in Manassas, Virginia. We're looking forward to share with you all the birth, the development, the challenges, and the future of our collection and our presentation, altogether different in STEM graphic novels, sequential art in STEM.
Pesu, before you begin, we're seeing like your whole screen and not just that window. Is that what you intended?
Oh, no. That is strange. Give me one moment.
Sure.
Can you see the presentation now?
Yes.
Awesome. Cool. Apologies for that. So before we begin the presentation, we just wanted to share with you all a quote that I feel like really helps encapsulate the mentality that we've had going into developing this collection. It is a quote by author and illustrator Art Spiegelman. Comics are the gateway drug to information literacy. So here's just a brief table of contents on how this presentation will be structured. We're first going to begin by sharing with you all the origins of this collection, how it came to be, our objectives, and some of the resources that we've used in order to uh, build this collection. We're also going to be sharing with you all what the collection looks like currently, some of our favorite books within the collection, and some of the challenges that we've come across when building a STEM-focused graphic novel collection. And finally, we are going to be sharing with you all the future as far as what we want to do with the collection moving forward. So here are our objectives. One big thing we wanted to hone in on was to enhance engagement. This isn't like a big surprise for anybody within the library field, but of course, since the pandemic, it's been a bit of a challenge just trying to re-engage our users with the library resources that we have. And we decided to use graphic novels just because of the visual component of them. One thing about graphic novels is that because of the visual nature and how the illustrations play alongside with the text, it allows our users to quickly retain and see the information as opposed to reading it from a typical textbook. So by the combination of visuals and text, it just gives our users a new way to engage with the educational material. We also wanted to improve information literacy, again, going back to that use of text and visuals. Graphic novels, they have like both conventional and unconventional ways of showing users the visualization of data and diagrams. And we're hoping with that visualization of data and diagrams, it will allow our students and our patrons to develop a deeper understanding of how they can interact with STEM information. That in turn, we're hoping that will foster and engage new creativity amongst our students to allow them to have new ways to approach and solve scientific problems. And finally, we are hoping to encourage diverse perspectives by spotlighting underrepresented groups.
Ooh, so for our timeline, this happened over a couple months to a year. Obviously, it's also still ongoing. But this originally started from a conversation between Heidi and Pesu over a collections project that he was doing in his library science class about graphic novels. A lot of us on the team are really big fan of graphic novels and manga and all that kind of stuff. So it was kind of, I guess, inevitable that this project would happen. So this conversation took place in September of 2024. And then after that, Pesu and Heidi kind of did outreach to us and said, like, hey, is this something you would be interested in? A lot of people said yes. So the next month we got together to just discuss goals, outcomes, and then created a document to track titles, spending, made a bunch of lists of things we need to do, like contact technical services for getting a new location and stickers and all that kind of logistics and all that kind of stuff. And then in December, usually our funds are approved sometime during the fall. But we decided that in December we were going to start ordering novels for the collection. And working with tech services to set up the collection in Primo. This is primarily a science and technology campus-based collection, and tech services is usually based on the main campus in Fairfax. So we also had to work out some logistics with that. Um, and then throughout December and through the spring, we were doing a lot of collecting. I think we originally said somewhere around $100 set aside for graphic novels. But we also had a vacancy. in one of our positions, so we were able to use some of that funds as well, or their collection funds to buy some graphic novels. So we actually ended up buying a lot, which was really great. I think we had like over 50 for our first year. And then in the spring of 2025, Alex purchased a display stand and set up this really awesome display to showcase the collection, which we will have on a future slide. So we have a pretty big science and technology team. So we have Alex Baker, who is our head of our science and technology team and the science and technology librarian. She did display, some general STEM. Me, Marissa Birkland, I did environmental sciences, health sciences, and biology. Heidi Blackburn and Rachel Cook are the computing librarians, so they did computing sciences. Crystal, who is our most recent addition, took care of neuroscience and biosciences. Peisu did general STEM as well as building the original foundation for the collection. Margaret Calkins did anything physical sciences. Tammy did engineering, and Diana also helped out with general STEM and health sciences. So lots of librarians, lots of different perspectives, lots of different people adding to this collection, which is really awesome. So a few of the resources that we used, some we highlighted for here. One that I found extremely helpful, as one of the people doing collecting for health sciences was the graphic medicine website. So it's literally just graphicmedicine.org. They have all these really awesome resources for you to use. They have stuff on COVID-19 comics. They have a searchable reviews section, so you can literally search up something like, bipolar disorder, and get some books with reviews about, specific health topics and things like that. So that was just like a wealth of being able to find related graphic novels and comics and things like that. We also just looked at other academic libguides. Obviously, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. A lot of people have either done similar projects or had them in the collection and wanted to highlight them. So just looking up STEM graphic novels or environmental science graphic novels or anything like that, and looking through other people's libguides to get some ideas of what we might be missing or what might be valuable to our collection. Um, Number three, I really like to do this. I literally just like go to bookstores all the time. And I also am a very big graphic novel reader. So I do go to the library a lot to get graphic novels. So that was a really great way for me to personally do this. So I literally live like a 5-minute walk from my public library, which is really great. So go to the public libraries, go to bookstores whenever I'm visiting new towns or just in the area and see what's out there. I've gotten a lot of really great things from there. And then finally, academic focus selection tools. So we use Gobi at George Mason, but there are also a few others that we used as well.
Related to our display, we were really excited to have this visual aid to draw attention to the collection right as you enter Mercer Library at the Sciences and Technology campus. I'm really grateful that our team was able to find a really great structure from the library store. The props that you see include devices and little trinkets from thrift stores, including the Salvation Army and Goodwill. These have been really fun to collect over time. And as well as the additional shelf, the slanted shelf there was something that we sort of repurposed from throughout the library. So it's really on a what started as a shoestring budget has expanded over time and generated a lot of excitement. Like I said, it's one of the first things you see as you enter the library, and I believe it has really helped to captivate people's attention. These are some of the books that folks have been most excited about. Of course, the covers themselves are really attractive, but the content is really important. And it's really timely for us to ensure that the titles reflect the programs that are here on our campus, which continue to evolve, with the life sciences and engineering building recently being erected on our campus. So some of the titles we really enjoy are Breathe, Journeys to Healthy Binding, Kimiko Does Cancer, a graphic memoir, Ada Lovelace and the Start of Computers, Hawking, and Marvel Anatomy. And often some of these books are on a slanted display where we can leave them open for folks to change the pages. Our student workforce have been really excited about engaging with this collection, often rearranging and reordering and reimagining our display as a way of keeping things fresh. So, of course, this journey has not been without its challenges. Most notably has been around funding. This is a very interesting, in some ways, difficult landscape in higher education as a whole, as we have a number of budgetary cuts and changes to our grant level funding across our institutions. So we've gotten very scrappy, as I mentioned, using resources from our local thrift stores and things of that nature. But I'm really grateful that one of the hurdles was not our administration and our leadership. They really bought into the idea of this collection. And I give a lot of credit to my team that was in place ahead of my tenure. I joined the institution in June of 2024. So a lot of the legwork and the planning began well before I showed up. My honor has been in advocating for things to come into fruition. The location itself, as we've mentioned, is at the SciTech campus or Sciences and Technology campus. It's the most remote. So we have gotten very intentional about our tabling events and orientations as opportunities to showcase the collection using some of the promotional materials that have already been generated. It's almost always part of our conversation when we're meeting with other folks across our library's network, as well as different departments. And thankfully, the funding model has helped with some of that reception from our leadership and administration, because of the funding codes assigned to each subject librarian, though at their discretion, using a nominal amount each semester to purchase these titles, instead of having a new fund erected to allocate those funds at the start, has been a saving grace as well.
Okay, I think I have about 2 minutes, so I'm gonna run through the rest of this. Of course, like everyone else, we have a LibGuide. We encourage you to go see it, infoguides.gmu.edu/STEM-GN, like graphic novel. We had three different parts of this. So we wanted to increase the visibility. Our science and technology campus branch library is about an hour from the main campus and another hour from the other branch. So you have to really drive or plan to get out there. So we wanted to let people know we have this. We wanted to make sure that we highlighted the collection because we have primos. If you just type in graphic novel, you get all sorts of different things. So we wanted to make sure to highlight it on this LibGuide, which is much more user-friendly. And of course, we want all of you to benefit from our work. Please come steal these titles for your own collection. Use that LibGuide to build up your own collections as well, because as Marissa said, it took a very big lift. We're out, we're at bookstores, we're on Gobi, we're on random websites trying to buy things. So please steal from our work. We have a lot of next steps, of course. We want to finish that LibGuide, even though December is sneaking up on us. We were going to get it done by the end of 2025. We're pushing our advertising. So the graphic you see there that says just use your Mason ID was drawn and designed by our very own Pesu. So we're going to push that out on posters, bookmarks, our social media as well. And then as a part of getting this collection out in advertising, we want to put it into a Primo collection itself. So our students who are at our other campuses or our distance students can browse this collection in Primo in an easier way. Of course, we are expanding this project. We are going to get additional books, pop-up rotating displays, and events with our campus partners are always on our mind. When you buy more books, you need more permanent shelving. So Alex is on the hunt to get us more shelving for these things. And then we're going to gather feedback. So this was what we call a soft launch. We kind of just made the project, we put it out there to get an understanding of what our students, faculty, and staff wanted to see. Now we're starting to formally gather that feedback. What do students want to see? What titles are we missing? Folks who love to read graphic novels like Marissa probably are able to tell us all sorts of things that we could add to our collection. So we have lots of next steps that we're very excited to start. Some of them are in progress and some of them will be next year. And of course, this is not enough time for us to tell you all about the amazing things that we have done, how to get around the administration or other kind of barriers, how to set it up, where to find campus partners. So we would love for you to contact us at George Mason Universities, and our contact information is there. And Marissa did drop the link to our LibGuide in the chat, so be sure to grab that as well.
Thank you all. What a great presentation. I am super excited to share this with our public services group for their book displays. We have a few minutes for questions. We're running a little late today, but we'll start with some questions. And it looks like Kaylee has put one in the chat. I'm trying to see. I was curious to learn more about the selection work and what search features you use to surface options. I don't know if y'all can read the chat or if you need me to read the whole question.
I honestly did not use Gobi, so if anybody else did, please feel free to go.
I use Gobi a lot, and it was not very helpful. But we have a very broad definition, and we talked about this as a team about the industry definition of graphic novel versus the sequential or other types of comic book type books that are often marketed for kids. We said if it can bring educational value to our collection, we are not going to gatekeep anything based on perceived reading level, because some of the things in STEM are very, very difficult. So I do want a fifth grade book on astrophysics. That was a stamp that was put on by the industry, not necessarily something that my readers are going to know about when they pick up that book. They just want to read and understand that particular topic. So we have a whole broad thing of of a spectrum of what we consider, because we don't look at like Lexile levels or what it's marketed to, and Gobi is just not great.
Good to know.
I will say that there's also this like thing in the graphic novel industry where a lot of people see graphic novels as for kids, which is very sad, because obviously they're for everyone. My mom often teases me about reading my comics. But yeah, a lot of these books that are classified as like young adult or kids, like honestly, when you read them, don't really seem like they are. I do find myself going into like the young adult section a lot to get graphic novels, and I'm like, I don't really know if this is a young adult thing. Or like, it's just classified as it just because they like think that it should be rather than like the actual like content and like, audience and things like that. So it's definitely an interesting thing to deal with.
Cool. Well, thank you all for this. I'm gonna cut us off here because we did run a little long and I want people to have a good break before we come back for the I Have a Problem session. But thank you to all of our short talk speakers, and thank you all for being here. Great conversation in the chat and in the Discord. And so we are going to come back at 1:45 for I Have a Problem, which will be led by some of the STEM Librarians Collaborative planning people. And hopefully you all come back and join us. We're going to talk about supporting STEM without a STEM background, and then mentoring new STEM librarians. So we will see you back here at 1:45 p.m. Eastern. Thank you.
All right, so let us begin our crowdsourced I Have a Problem session. So our first problem for this session is, how can you support STEM disciplines if you don't have a STEM background yourself? So there are a lot of STEM librarians who enter the profession without having a lot of past experience, either educational experience or job experience with STEM. And sometimes people have a combo of being both new to librarianship and new to STEM. And even for librarians who come in with experience in STEM, sometimes they're asked to support a whole bunch of disciplines, so they might not feel like an expert in everything. That's the situation that I found myself in when I first became a STEM librarian 7 years ago. I have a biochem degree, so I felt pretty good as a new librarian supporting biology and chemistry. But I also had to support almost every department in our science college. So when it came to working with like computer science and math, I definitely felt out of my element, especially when working with like graduate students and faculty on their research, since at that point they had much more education than I did in those areas. So this can be a really challenging situation because, as I'm sure many of us have experienced, imposter syndrome is something that is commonplace in our field. And it can really be a struggle to assist with things like research consultations, teaching, and collection development when you're still building your own subject expertise in the areas that you are supporting. So with that, we would love to hear from all of you. Have you found yourself in a situation where you've been the subject librarian for an area that you didn't have a background in? And if so, what was challenging about it and how did you manage that? Or on the other side, if you're someone that did come into your role with a pre-existing STEM background, or if you're someone that's been on the job for a while now and think that you've earned some STEM street cred, let us know what tips you have for your fellow librarians about how they can build their expertise and feel more confident supporting a variety of disciplines. So at this point, we'd love to hear from all of you. You can start sharing ideas and resources in the chat, and we would also love it if you felt comfortable unmuting. So feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to contribute a comment, and we'll call on you. Otherwise, you can use the chat too. Yes, Emma, go ahead.
Yeah. So I definitely was this topic around 8 years ago, and so I was happy to see the topic. I had to miss the last couple days, but this is a topic near and dear to my heart. Um, and so I have like a one funny and one serious suggestion to start off. I'm like a prime millennial, and so my instinct when got in, I was not new to librarianship. I had been a business and social work librarian for the previous 5 years, but yeah, I don't have a STEM background to speak of. And so my instinct was, oh, I know that scientists have blogs. I'm going to find some really good blogs of mathematicians and physicists and sort of engage myself in the informal conversation of the field. Um, that was it's funny, but sort of serious. And then the thing that I really had to work at the first 3 or 4 years is, especially since the mathematicians are, I work with mathematicians and physicists, postdoctoral researchers, both of them, but the mathematicians are sort of the dominant population here at the Institute for Advanced Study. And so I had to educate myself about how monographs and articles are differently weighted in the process of mathematical research. And that took a lot of on-the-job training. Although one thing that has helped with my imposter syndrome, other than time, is just because I work in such a specialized place, I tell the story of literally standing at tea a few years ago during the short talks that everybody does at the beginning of the year here, and where people from one subfield are encouraged to go to all of the talks to figure out what everybody else is doing. And one of the mathematicians said to a colleague, "Is like, how much of that talk did you understand?" "Oh, about 40 to 50%." That once you get this is going to be different for undergrads and undergrad servicing librarians certainly, but maybe as you go towards grad student and faculty, and especially research faculty, people are so specialized that you have to remember sometimes they don't understand what each other is talking about, and then that's the good thing about the short talks and the colloquia that get people to understand each other maybe a little better. But I think it's just embedding yourself in the process of the field and how knowledge is produced. And that's mainly been my experience.
Thank you so much, Emma. Those are some great suggestions. And I see there are a lot of great ones coming in the chat too. Watching like old school kind of PBS shows is one. And yeah, really just getting out there and talking to people can be really helpful. So I see Sam has their hand raised. So go ahead and share.
Hey, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, was math before I was a librarian. So this is not me. But I do want to say, and sort of as a reminder to everyone out there, is that the role that you are playing as a librarian is not as a mathematician. It is not as a scientist. You are bringing your own stuff in there. So I was definitely hired because I was a mathematician, not because of my librarian skills. And I actually had a much longer like learning curve to learn how to become a good librarian than I think good librarians would have, sort of learning about the specific information needs of people in these fields. Because while you might, sort of feel some imposter syndrome things about being in these spaces because they're not your area, you have to remember that they are imposters when it comes to actually using the library and understanding information literacy. I have seen much better information literacy amongst humanities and social science researchers than I ever had amongst STEM researchers. They just sort of go and do whatever they want. And it is up to us and all of you folks who actually have these really incredible skills as librarians to help them realize what they are missing. It's not what you are missing, it's what they are missing.
Thank you, Sam. That is such a great point. And yeah, that's something like when I was new to both librarianship and some of the disciplines I was supporting. But like even when I was working with ones that I felt confident about, still going into a class meant, oh, what should I actually teach these people? And I'd go back and forth with the faculty, like, oh, what databases do you want me to show them? Or like, what topics do you want? And they would turn back to me and say, you're the expert. Why don't you decide? Show them what you think is best, which was helpful in some regard, but also was like, okay, but I still am not entirely sure. So I did my best. It worked out okay, I think, because they kept asking me to come back. So Nancy, go ahead.
Hey y'all. I love hearing from everybody, and it helps put it in perspective for me that my experience is not so unique. But I felt really comfortable with most of the sciences when I was hired on, because I have a marine biology background. And so I felt really comfortable talking to the scientists. In fact, when I was hired, I was told, the scientists, some of them are kind of quirky. And I said, have you looked around the library? Scientists don't have a lock on being quirky, but having some familiarity with that helped me open some doors to have conversations. But when I was asked to take on nursing and health sciences, I felt very underprepared. So I spent a lot of time talking to the faculty about what do you see gaps in your students? What do they need the most help with? And where can I be the most impactful? And those conversations can be hard to get your foot in the door sometimes, but that really helped me because I don't want to show up in a classroom and teach something that either they've already talked about or it's not helpful. And I echo a lot of the comments that are in the chat about being science curious and really, familiarizing yourself with some general principles. I think it's really exciting to see how people have adapted to this. But those conversations have really helped because it gets me in their classroom, and then when they see that I really can make an impact with their students, then it gets me back in their classroom. And so that's helped me a lot. So cool.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. And that made me think of another idea too. Like one thing that we like that often comes up in STEM instruction is science communication. So if we're coming at it not having that same expertise that our students might have, then that's a really great opportunity for them to practice explaining things to other audiences too. So that's another role. Okay, so I think I saw Margot's hand first, so go ahead.
Hi, I really love this topic. I see. Am I frozen? No. Okay.
You're good.
One of the things that was really helpful to me when I was at the beginning of this situation, I'm still in it every time I get a new discipline as a liaison role, but somebody mentioned to me when I was a librarian for like all the sciences, well, even if I had a background as a psychology researcher, I wouldn't necessarily know anything about computer science. And so, no matter what, I'm gonna have some learning that I need to do. And also learning, going back to Sam's example of math, learning from faculty members that undergrad students in math aren't necessarily even expected to be able to read disciplinary research papers in their own discipline when they're at an undergraduate level was really helpful and a big relief to me. And that in hearing from other mathematicians that they can go to symposia and presentations that are in a different specialization within their own field and not necessarily understand what that person is talking about was also really helpful. So one of the things that I've been trying to do is going to lots of lectures and symposia in the disciplinary areas that I am working with, and doing like what Nancy said is talking to the faculty about gaps and the publication trends and priorities within their areas, like Emma mentioned. And I love this topic, and I really appreciate the collection development tips that are being shared in Discord related to this topic, because that was an area that I found incredibly difficult to get immediately familiar with. So thanks to everyone for sharing your tips.
Yeah, thank you so much, Margot. So Krista, go ahead.
So one thing that I have been a STEM librarian for 20 plus years. And one thing that I still find really, really helpful is to come to conferences like this or to read in the literature that other people are like, well, this department doesn't, it's the same discipline as a department I'm dealing with. So to know that I'm not the only one experiencing like computer science being like, maybe not you, maybe not right now. There's some, because a lot of times I think, especially if you're starting with a new discipline or if you're new to whatever, you think, is it me? Is it me? It must be me. I must be doing something or need to do something different to get them to respond to me. And a lot of times it is not you. It's not that you can't do things to try to build those bridges or strengthen ties. It's just that their MO is very much different than maybe another department who's always talking to you. And so definitely if you're also coming from, I've done some interim roles with some humanities and even the social sciences, and they're so much more responsive to me than my mathematics folks. It just is a difference. So it's helpful to know it's not you. I promise it's not you.
Yeah, thank you, Krista. Yeah, we continue to have a lot of great conversation happening in the chat too. So some recommendations of resources to look at. I know a little bit up the thread, Alex Carroll shared a link to a book that was published through ALA editions about supporting STEM researchers and educational programs. And a few people mentioned Sutton Selector for collection development as well, though with a note that some of the resources there may be a little bit out of date at this time. And yeah, lots of great examples of how folks that are like well experienced in their field still might not have that library experience too. If one example of like people asking open access, publishing, and copyright questions only at the point where their article has been approved, which as librarians, we would hope they're thinking about those things sooner. And just, yeah, lots of people not having that actual like research experience or when you're in graduate school, you might have like people finding articles for you. So someone could get to the point where they're a faculty member and like that's where they really need librarians to guide them. And I think there was a great comment as well in the chat from Leah about telling students directly that you don't have a STEM background. I have used a little bit of that too with subject areas that I am not an expert in. So I let them know like, okay, so you are a computer science student. I don't have that background, so we can work together and you'll be the computer science subject expert and I'll be the expert on the research process. And then collaboratively, we can create something really cool together. So definitely +1 for that approach. All right, so at this point, I think we can start to gravitate towards our second topic, which is very much related to this first one as well, because we've had a few people mention that they are new to librarianship and STEM. So our next problem of the day is how can we effectively mentor STEM librarians? So we have a lot of attendees who are new to the field. We may even have some current MLIS students, if so, welcome. And we also might have people that are not necessarily new to librarianship, but they may be new to supporting STEM or specific disciplines within STEM. In addition, we also probably have some supervisors of STEM librarians in the room, myself included in that category. And so these folks may be looking for ways to help support and create a positive experience for any new hires in their department. So let's all chat about this. If you are an early career librarian or just new to STEM librarianship specifically, what have you found challenging and what advice or support would you like to get from more experienced STEM librarians? Or if you're someone that had a really memorable mentoring experience, either positive or negative, we invite you to share that as well so that we can learn for it and really just create a better community where we all feel welcome and supported. And so once again, feel free to share your ideas in the chat. And if you would like to speak, you can raise your hand and we will call on you. Yes, Emma, go ahead.
So just briefly, something I wish someone had told me, and actually a lot of PAM folks did tell me, like my first 1 or 2 years, is that it's like any job, it takes a while to develop your scripts. And I'm like, I want to mention to like maybe the young folks in here that it's like it was really nice, I think 3 years in to take a step back and say, oh, this process that would have taken me, I think, the full afternoon when I had just started because I didn't know the area, took me like 20 minutes because it's like it's gonna take like a year to 18 months. Not only to like sometimes get a sense of the disciplines, but also get a sense of the particular culture of the scientists that you're working with, because it's like it's going to be like the physicists at the institute are not going to be the physicists at University of Oregon, are not going to be the physicists at like the Space Telescope Institute. So give yourself some grace and some patience.
Yeah, great advice. Thank you. Alex, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
Hi. So one of the things that I would say, so I lead a team. I'm at Vanderbilt University, and I lead a team of STEM librarians here. And I think for folks that want to mentor more junior colleagues, I think one of the things that's really important to do is to model the kind of vulnerability that you want your team to show back to you. I think one of the things that can be really hard is to remember all the things we don't know when we first get started. Like this, I find all the time shows up. And, I think a lot of times this is the problem that faculty have, right? If we think about PIs, they don't remember what their first year PhD students don't know. And so that shows up all the time for their students not knowing what their students need to know, and they ask us to do it, right? But I think it's also important for us to do that with our colleagues, right? So a lot of times what I do is, I know that it takes a lot of time to become any good at teaching or presenting. And so I think it's really important to ask your junior colleagues to sit in on a talk and ask them to give you feedback on stuff so that they know it's okay for them to do that for you too. And I think kind of really creating that and modeling the kind of sense that you're not just going to ask help from me, but I'm going to ask help from you, and we're going to learn together because none of us are finished products, is one of the most important gifts you can really give a junior colleague. And, it's something I started my career at the University of Maryland, and I had more senior STEM librarians do that for me. And that's like a gift I'm always trying to give back to folks.
Thank you, Alex. That is such helpful advice. And I see we have some great comments in the chat too. One comment we have is from Jenna, who mentioned specifically gaining experience supporting evidence synthesis. I think quite a few of us can probably relate to that too, as it continues to expand to more and more disciplines beyond just the health sciences, where it seems to have really started. So Jenna mentioned it was helpful to shadow more experienced librarians or those in adjacent fields. Carolyn, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah. As a new librarian, I've been a STEM librarian and just a librarian in general for about just over 3 years now. But I wanted to say that as a new librarian, taking advantage of formal mentoring programs that are done in different organizations was super helpful. So I did the ACRL's Science and Technology section has a mentoring program that matched me with another STEM librarian, and it was super helpful to hear from somebody at a different institution. And I did it while in library school, so they actually helped me during my job hunting process and what I should be looking for and stuff like that. But I've done lots of other mentoring programs just through different organizations, and you get different perspectives from people. Even if you maybe do a program that's outside of STEM, you get to hear what people are doing in other parts of the library at different parts of the country. So I would definitely take advantage of if you see a mentoring program that, because people are always like, hey, we don't have enough people who want to do this. Let's give it a try. Or if you've been in the field a long time, it definitely is helpful for us who are starting out. So, and I'm still getting connections from that experience, people, oh, I know that Carolyn knows this, maybe you should talk to her about it and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Carolyn. So yeah, definitely take advantage of all of those mentoring opportunities that are out there. Because of course it's helpful to talk to people at your own institution to get some of that institutional context, or if you're taking over a subject area that someone else had, getting their intel about which faculty members respond to which types of communication and all sorts of information that you can share. It's really helpful, but also getting perspectives from science librarians that are working at other schools is so valuable too, just to kind of get out of your own bubble and hear what other people have to say. I'll put in a plug for the ACRL Science and Technology sections mentoring program. I participated in that as a mentor, and it was a really positive experience for me as a mentor, and hopefully for my mentee as well, as we can kind of learn from each other. And yeah, I see in the chat there's a lot of conversation about one area where people may need mentoring when they're new, whether they're new to STEM or just librarianship, and that is in the area of teaching. Quite a few people mentioned that their library school didn't have a lot of classes on instruction, so that is another thing where you very much have to kind of figure it out on the job. And there was one great suggestion about that topic too from Amy, which is taking advantage of your institution's faculty development center's pedagogical trainings. So yeah, if your institution has something like that, that can be really helpful too. It doesn't all have to be library specific. I think a lot of the broader pedagogical conversations that may be happening at your campus are helpful too. Yeah, I think Kaylee has a great comment in the chat about when she was a newer librarian, she said it wasn't very clear to her what being a mentee meant. So yeah, if you're running your own mentoring program at your library, making it clear kind of what those roles are and what type of things like a mentee can ask a mentor and how they can help, super helpful too. Go ahead, Sam.
And I just want to put in a great plug for places like the STEM Librarians Collaborative Discord, as well as, listservs like PamNet. Like that's where I got all the help that I could get. Because I mean, there was no other math librarian at my school. It's not like schools have two math librarians. And most of the, questions I had were about that. And so I could just send an email to a listserv and people would answer me. Because you know what it turns out, surprisingly, librarians are quite helpful people. It's almost like they tend to get into this job because they like helping people and are very curious about a lot of different things. So even if they don't know about the topic, they will go research it for you. And so like that was great. And yeah, I mean, that's what we originally set the Discord up for was, so that when you have questions, there's a whole I have a problem channel. And so yeah, you can always just reach out to your other librarians, even if you don't want like say full mentoring. If you want to do what say Kaylee did in the chat, and ask one-off questions from time to time. That's what we are here for. Even those of us who aren't actively employed as librarians right now will go in there and answer those questions.
Yes, as you did for me very recently. Thank you, Sam. And yeah, if anyone has other suggestions about particular listservs that you found helpful, definitely share those either verbally or in the chat. The Chem Info listserv has been mentioned. And of course, there is ACRL STS as well, but that one does require you to be an ACRL member, so to be aware of that. And thanks to everyone for the kind comments about how STEM LibCo has helped you. That's really great to see. And that's really the type of community that we want to provide. And I see an engineering list has been shared as well, which is great. And I see Emma has her hand raised. Go ahead.
Also, questions are good, but also I'd like to recommend. This is also because I'm a very very avid reader of the website Ask a Manager, and sometimes the most useful questions can be on a place like PamNet or at these conferences or in person. Is like, okay, is this sort of a common situation that y'all have faced before, or is this maybe unique and it needs a different approach, especially with workplace culture things. It's like there could definitely be a no. This is not something you should have to put up with. Find help is a good thing to hear.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm also an avid reader of Ask a Manager, which helps me as a manager as well. But I liked it even before I found myself as a supervisor. All right, so it is now 2:15. So thank you all for sharing your thoughts and experiences. This was a great conversation. And now I'll turn it over to Kaylee, who will introduce our Birds of a Feather discussions for today.
Yes, thank you. So Elizabeth, I believe you're creating the breakout rooms while I am talking, yes?
Yeah, so if you want to speak slowly, that would be great.
Okay,
Otherwise, we'll
so
just have a little bit
I
of a
will try to speak
pause.
very slowly. It'll be very, very difficult because I tend to talk pretty quickly. But we have our final Birds of a Feather session today. It's about 45 minutes of discussion. And so we have a great set of topics for you. And so we're going to be repeating again collection development and let's look at AI tools together in case you didn't have the opportunity last time. We also have one on librarian publishing where it is rumored that there are several people who are editors at various journals are planning to be there so that they can answer some questions from people if they have questions about such a thing. We also have one about doing STEM outreach and another one about creating good instruction examples and demos. And then finally, if it's Friday afternoon and you're just like, I just want to talk to people, but I need a break from talking about, library things specifically, we also have a recharging room where you can have some social conversation. So again, about 45 minutes. We will give you some notifications as we get close to time. But thank you all so much for coming to the conference. We hope that you've had a great past few days and that the remaining sessions today will also be exactly what you need and want. So great. Are the breakout rooms ready?
They are.
Okay,
Yes, so
great.
I will
I
open
wasn't sure
those
how much
now.
longer I needed to talk.
Yes, perfect timing, Haley.
Great, great. So let us know if you need any help getting into one.
And if you need live captioning in your breakout room, please let us know so that we can assign our captioner to your room.